Hello, Karen. We are so excited to have you with us today. So, everybody, welcome to Unravel and Uplift. All right, Karen, I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to jump right into it. I think a lot of people hear the word hypnosis and immediately picture something from a stage show, but I know your word couldn't be any more different from that. So, let's start from the beginning and unravel what hypnosis really is. And let's talk about the myths associated around that. So, you tell someone that you're a hypnotherapist. What reactions do you normally get? And what do those moments reveal about what people perceive hypnosis is? So if you can tell us about what it is and then what the reaction is.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you the reaction first, and it depends. Somebody who has been exposed to hypnosis from a positive perspective, I can just see them kind of light up. Maybe they've experienced it and they have a very positive reaction. It is a question that I always start out with. What do you know about hypnosis? Most of the time, people say, all I know is what I've seen on TV and a movie, or when I was in school, they had a hypnotist on the stage and he made people do crazy things. He or she made people do crazy things, so on and so forth. And typically, that's a terrible, I think, representation of hypnosis because the true use of hypnosis is contacting and accessing the power of the subconscious mind. And when people understand just the impact that their conscious mind can have in supporting them to make changes, to uh, improve in some way, to move forward. It is just so, so different from anything you will ever see on a stage.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I think you're right around those misconceptions. And so if you could shift just one belief people have mentioned to you about hypnosis, what would you want them to understand instead?
Well, I think it is that first thing. Maybe the first question I ask is, what do you know about hypnosis? The second one is, do you know that you have two minds? You have a subconscious mind and a conscious mind.
Hmm.
And I think most people today realize that, but every once in a while they don't. But even if they realize they have those two separate minds, they don't understand how they work and the difference in how they work and how they impact our life on a daily basis. So that would be the next thing is what do you know about your subconscious mind versus your conscious mind? And we kind of go on from there.
Very good.
It really sounds like part of your journey, Karen, when you are meeting with a client for the first time that is exploring hypnosis or someone that's just interested in it, is really a lot of education around this subconscious piece, the conscious, and also just, I suppose, demystifying, if I get my words out, demystifying those, like you say, preconceptions that exist.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that is the beginning, and I certainly wanna know where they're coming from. I don't wanna spend a lot of time lecturing them on something that they already understand, but if they don't, I wanna find out what do they know, and I want to meet them where they are rather than, as I said, kinda lecturing and telling them something that maybe they know a little bit about, and I want to be sure that they understand whatever I am telling them about. Uh, well, let me kind of start with you, with the two of you and your listeners, that the conscious mind is the one that is there all the time. It's talking to us all the time. It's the one that just never shuts up.
Hmm.
And often what it says is not always that kind. It can be very harsh, very critical, very judgmental. And the difference in the subconscious mind is there's no judgment, there's no criticism, there's no second guessing, there's no questioning or pushing or stressing. The subconscious mind is there to serve us. And when we learn how to access that and accept the fact that it's there to support us, help us if we want to move in a different direction from what we're currently doing. It's there to help us, and we just need to educate it. It's waiting for our information, for our instruction. And by the same token, it also is a storage, if you will, of everything we have ever experienced, everything we have known throughout our lives, and also the beliefs that we formed. And that's often where we need to start to make changes.
I love that so much. Like, that was really great for a rookie like myself to understand what that actually means. So that was so valuable. Thank you.
Good. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
So Karen,
Yeah.
when we start to think about hypnosis in practice, who is it really for? And I suppose adding on to that, do you need someone to be responsive and almost willing to be a part of it?
It certainly is going to be more effective if they do uh, believe that change can take place. Um, it's not a lot of fun when somebody says, "You know what? I don't really believe anything you do."
Mhm. But that would be really any therapy, right?
Well,
I mean, if you
sure.
go to a psychologist or a therapist,
Yeah.
if you go in a little resilient, or not resilient, but defiant, or yeah, resisting what maybe change could take place, so that's really not unique to hypnosis.
Sure.
If you're not open to change, it will be a challenge. Yeah, I see that. That makes sense.
Yeah. Now, people might say, "I'm not sure about this, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Hmm.
Willing to see what happens." That is an openness and willingness to do just that. Let's see. But if you come in and say, "Well, this isn't going to work," well, you're right. It won't.
And
So
so,
I absolutely want, and I'll tell you that brings up a interesting point. I will often be hired by a parent who wants me to work with their child, and that for me has ranged from age 6 up to 20s when
Hmm.
that has been the situation. There again, if I start working with a person and they just have no interest, that's not a good place to start. So even if they're a young child and they're at least open to talking to me, working with me, and understanding how powerful their mind is, that's the key, is helping them understand. You have it. It's not me. I don't make the change, but I guide and help and support in you making the changes that you want to make.
and I know you gave us a really beautiful description of our conscious and our subconscious minds and almost what they do and contrast with each other. What actually happens during hypnosis to the brain?
Research has been done that there are changes, and I'll be honest, from a scientific standpoint, I can't describe exactly
Mhm.
what happens, but I've seen some of the videos, the pictures that describe just what happens in the brain, and different parts of the brain light up, and other parts of the brain kind of you can see them calm down,
Hmm.
and so there are absolutely physical changes that can take place in the brain. And the main thing that we do in hypnosis, maybe not the main thing, but where we really get started is quieting that conscious mind, which helps an individual become more and more relaxed. And that's the key to accessing the subconscious mind. And no matter what we accomplish or don't accomplish in a particular session, I always have people say, "Oh my God, I don't know when I've been that relaxed."
Mm.
So that in itself can be very healing. That can be, and often something takes place when you're that relaxed that you don't even realize until later. So, that's one of the main things is that people need to understand they're going to get into a place where they're extremely relaxed. They are not giving over control. That's a misconception. And what they've seen on a stage or whatever, get that impression, oh, somebody's going to take over my mind. Well, I don't do that. And it just doesn't work that way. And they are in complete control. I've been in sessions where somebody's been interrupted, um, and they can come right back to the place where we left off. And when they realize that they're in total control, again, it makes a huge difference.
I just had like a visualization of that self-talk being switched off
Ah,
at
yeah.
the point in which you described that sense of calm. And I just think how magical that must feel to have that inner critic that sometimes positive, but there's a lot of it, right? A lot of self-talk going on in there, just to have that silence for a moment.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's very powerful. Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
And one of the things I do is I help people learn the tools to get to that place by themselves. I
Mhm.
can't always be there, and I think it would be a disservice if I didn't give them the ability to get to that same place. That doesn't mean that they don't want to work with me on a continuing basis or come back later, whatever it happens to be, and maybe help them with a new issue or an issue that has kind of come up again. But in the meantime, I want them to have tools that when they're in a point of crisis or question or challenge, that they know how to get to a better place in their mind, how to
Mhm.
access the subconscious. So um, don't leave people hanging out thinking they need me all the time because I'm not going to be there.
And is it almost like, Karen, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it almost like planting a seed to say, if you feel like smoking, like you hear about things, or if you feel anxiety when you have to get on stage and talk, or if you're running a track meet and you feel like you're running out of breath, even though you're not, like you get this panic, are you planting a seed or a thought to say, when this happens, you're going to exchange it with this? Is that sort of how it works?
Sure, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and we kind of well, not kind of, we practice that. We in depending on what the situation is, I had a client recently, who, suddenly was just terrified to fly. And she had flown for years in her job and never had a problem. And she had one kind of bumpy flight, and for some reason, it just really impacted her. And she came away from that situation with this excruciating fear. And in that case, it was her husband that connected us. And he said, when she flies now, not only does she have a couple glasses of wine, but she takes a tranquilizer, and
Mhm.
it actually gets physically ill and has been known to throw up when she would think about flying. And when she would fly with him, oh, she would just grab onto him like crazy. Well, she needed to take an international flight for her job, and she was terrified, and
Yeah.
"I'm gonna tell him I can't go." And she knew she couldn't do that because she was in a position that, you don't just say, "Well, I can't go." And so I worked with her for a few weeks, and I have to tell you that her husband actually was the first one who told me. He said, "I talked to her when she got there, and I said, 'How was the flight?' She said, 'It was great.' It was like an 8 or 9-hour flight." She said, "I slept, I read, I watched a movie."
Wow.
And she said it was just fine. And she was like that coming back to the States too.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
And I what a joy. What a
And
joy.
to think of something that's that traumatic where you have to self-medicate, that
To the
which
point
is a
of being
slippery
sick.
slope, because where does that
Yeah.
take you?
Sure.
Or the anxiety is so intense that you're getting physically ill and it
Yeah.
consumes you and ruins an experience, whether it's business or pleasure, because
Mhm.
of flight. And to have that improved for her is That's amazing. That is such a gift.
Well, and I think my question or your question that I was answering was, what do we do to get to that point? Do we plant a seed? Well, not only did we plant a seed, but we rehearsed.
Mhm.
We I helped her walk through that flight from the time she left home by the
Yeah,
starting out when she packed her bag. And, just walking through that and then having, just experiencing a very pleasant flight can make all the difference in the world, and that switch is from, "Oh my god, I'm terrified, I've gotta get on an airplane," and
right,
that's our conscious mind that would just keep talking to her unless we had done our work together and she knew that she had some tools to use if that started to come up again.
And you know what, Karen? It just sounds transformational that someone who had that critical self-talk going on was able to overcome it and actually experience something in their life that they'd done before without any issues and actually enjoyed.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is, and that's very confusing to an individual, but they can actually say, "Well, I never had trouble flying before.
mhm,
Yeah.
Why am I having this problem now?" And, often we don't need to find out why.
Yeah.
That isn't, I combine coaching with my hypnosis, and I always say that my coaching is solution focused. We don't spend a lot of time talking about what is or what has been, but what do we want it to be? And that's where we use hypnosis too, is seeing that and feeling that. What do you feel when things are going the way you want them to go? And instilling those thoughts and feelings are game changers, no question.
I know before you talked about the sensation of people feeling very relaxed when they're under hypnotherapy.
Hmm.
What else should someone expect to feel and experience if they were to partake in hypnosis?
I think that's the most important thing for them to know, that I can't tell them exactly what they're going to experience because it depends on the issue that we might be dealing with. But just that state of accepting, of seeing things differently. And that's so much easier when we are relaxed, when our body is relaxed, when our
Mm.
mind is relaxed, that can happen so much more easily. Um, I don't know if this is the right time to say it, but it's coming up in my own mind that something people don't realize is that we are being hypnotized all the time. When we get involved in a book or a movie and we just don't even notice what's happening around us, we're in a hypnotic trance. When we pull our cars into a parking lot and
mhm.
we're we're told, go down this lane and park this way and we're in the parking trance.
Yeah, that happens all the time where you just drive somewhere and don't realize how you've
Abs-
driven or how you got there. You just are sort of programmed to get from A to B, and you're like,
yeah,
"I don't even know how I got here." Yeah, that
absolutely.
definitely resonates. Yeah.
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 And I tell people, if you bringing up a plane, if you get on a plane and that pilot isn't in a trance to fly that plane, you don't want to be a passenger.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You want him to be so focused, so much in flying this plane trance that nothing can take him out of that focus. That's where you want him to be.
That
And
makes
that's where
sense.
we want to be in certain situations.
I think it really does direct that attention to those misconceptions again. Like I don't know if you ever watched The Jungle Book. The Jungle Book,
Yeah.
there's a snake, and the snake is under the trance, hypnotized. And I think a lot of people carry those kind of mental images around with them, don't they? If it's like literally, you are not in control. You are just following. But what I'm hearing is it's completely different to that. You are in control. It's almost like you're quieting parts of your brain in order for you to be able to work on the part of your brain that needs relaxation before you can progress and move forward.
Mhm. I think of a particular situation where I was working with a client, and I tell people it's better not to have your pet in the room with you
Mm-hmm.
because pets are very sensitive, and they can pick up a difference in the energy in the room if you're doing hypnosis. And typically, they're going to want to be near you. It's not a bad thing, but you just don't want that disconnection, if you will. Well, anyway, I had a woman that she's very, very relaxed, and everything's going really well. And a cat just climbed up on her chest. And of course, it startled her. And forgive me, I hear sirens in the
Oh,
background.
totally fine.
I've got my windows open. I should.
This is real life. Real
This
life.
is.
Sorry about that. Anyway, so this cat climbed, and of course, she was startled. And she said, I have two cats, and I closed them out of the room. She said, but I have one cat that knows how to open the door.
Mm.
And that's how much that animal wanted to be near her. But the point I wanna make is she was able to get up, become fully aware, take the cat, put it out of the room, and close the door in a different way so the cat couldn't get in. And when she came back, of course, she had been interrupted, but it took a very short period of time for me to just suggest you're going right back to where you were. You're just as relaxed as you were, and one can do that very, very easily.
If someone's like hesitant
Oh,
or just curious, like I feel like they could be one in the same, right? There's a hesitation, there's some curiosity. What would you say to them, Karen?
well, first of all, I'd want to know what is their curiosity about? What are they curious about? What are they, if there's a concern, what is it? I don't want to presume something that it maybe isn't the issue. And often we can just turn that around very, very quickly. So that's the first thing I want to know is um, what are you curious about? What do you question? What are you if you have any doubt, what is your doubt? And then answer that specifically so that I'm really so often we have people that just kind of get off on their own thing. Well, I want you to know this. And I think I used the word lecture earlier. And that seems to me to be so pointless unless you really know where the person's coming from and what they're questioning. Where does their skepticism come from? What are they skeptical about? So then we go on from there, and I do my best to answer that, and would hopefully bring them to the point where they say, "Okay, let's go." Um, but if like I said before, if somehow they are just so doubtful and, uh, just don't believe that we can accomplish anything, it's kind of a waste of both of our time to, push something that just isn't gonna work. If they believe it isn't gonna work, it chances are it won't.
I think you've done such a wonderful job of really explaining to us the difference between our subconscious and our conscious, what hypnosis is and what it isn't, really kind of taking away some of those misconceptions. Um, I think I'd like to dig in a little deeper as to something that's even more important, I suppose, why our minds work the way they do. And I suppose when I think about that, and our audience is primarily women, midlife women, um, I think many of us have stopped and thought, why am I doing this? I know better, but I keep doing the same thing. So I think like lots of our daily behavior is actually driven by what I'm hearing might be the subconscious or maybe even the conscious, and I'm not sure. And I'm just wondering like how much of that we're actually aware of, how much we're not aware of, how much our life events impact that. And I know, Karen, that you are a hypnotherapist, and I know we touched a little bit on the science before, and you're not proclaiming to be a scientist, but I'm just wondering if your experience as a hypnotherapist has really helped give you some insight into that repetitive talk, those things that we just keep telling ourselves?
Well, I have an associate, a friend and an associate who, um, she makes the comment, she says, "It's all BS." And of course, that kinda startles you for a minute. And then she clarifies that BS stands for your belief system. And there are so many things in our belief system that we formed so many years ago. Sometime, and I'll give you a short story in a moment of someone where that became so clear. And if typically we're not going to be aware of that, and that's where hypnosis can be very, very helpful, because I mentioned earlier that our experiences, everything we know, is in our subconscious, and through hypnosis we can tap into things that have happened in the past, beliefs we've formed in the past, things we learned, and they don't come to the surface very easily. So hypnosis can be very helpful there. And a great example of that, I know you mentioned women, but an example that comes to my mind actually was a man. And he was in his 60s. And he came to me because he said, "I can't swallow pills." Now, that may sound like kind of a not foolish, inconsequential thing. Well, he said, "I have to take more medication now. I want to take more vitamins." And he said, "I can't swallow pills, and I haven't been able to since I was a kid." He said, "I've tried so many things. People have tried to help me do this, that, and the other thing, and he couldn't do it." And so that was a case where we did go back in history, and we found out that as a toddler, his mother, every time he would have a cold or something, and she would give him baby aspirin, she would crush the baby aspirin in a spoon and then put a little bit of like cherry juice, strawberry, some kind of juice, and then have him drink more juice. So to him, it he formed a belief that was the only way you ever took medication, period. And it was very warm. Um, he had a feeling of comfort and being taken care of. It was a very, very good memory for him. What he didn't realize, though, was that he formed a belief as a toddler. And he came to the awareness that had happened. And I remember him saying, "That's crazy. I don't need to believe that anymore. That was the little baby that had that belief. I don't need to
Right.
believe that now."
But it's ingrained so deeply,
Yeah,
right? Like, you
it's very
probably
deep.
don't realize the
Mhm.
deep connection that it has.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
have to tell you that within a day or two, he was swallowing all of his vitamins, all of
Mhm.
his pills. And he said, "If I just start to get a feeling of not being," he said, "I just take a deep breath and I relax and I can swallow that pill." I happened to encounter his wife, oh gosh, a year later, year and a half later. And it was interesting. She said, "He's still swallowing all his pills." So once you have that knowledge, that was a case of just having the awareness and the knowledge of where it came from, that he was able to very, very quickly change it.
Yeah,
It was like
that's an interesting story because obviously that was so deep, he didn't realize where that root was coming from. But for people who do know where it's coming from, and like people who want to quit smoking or they have a habit that they're trying to quit, why doesn't that willpower, why is it not strong enough? When people know, like, I've got to stop doing this and they can't override it.
Oh gosh. I think willpower is one of the most difficult things to deal with. I'm a believer, and I try to impart this belief that the harder we try to do something or not do something, or to change something, the harder it becomes, because we are using willpower. And we're not using the power of our subconscious mind. What we're doing is, oh, I need to quit. I got to quit smoking. And your conscious mind says, well, good luck with that.
Right. It's like the angel of the devil, right?
Yeah, you're a smoker. Come on, you're a
Right.
smoker. And as long as you continue to use willpower and that's your driving force, you're going to have that constant conflict. And you're going to have the conscious mind just continuing to tell, no, you need that cigarette.
Right.
Don't play
Yeah.
games with me. You need that cigarette. You may
Right.
not need it now, but you'll need it in a half an hour. And same thing with, sugar, whatever. So yeah, and it does help to get in touch with, is there a reason that you're so drawn to a cigarette or sugar or whatever it might be? So we do a little bit of exploration on that. Sometimes it's enough to turn it around, but we
Yeah.
don't use willpower.
Yeah. And then I guess that makes sense, right? Like if I was smoking and I keep telling myself, like, this is terrible for me and I hate it when I do this, and you beat yourself up, but there's still that part of it that's like, but it's so satisfying when I smoke, or it makes me feel less stressed. Like, I guess that's where working with someone like yourself helps break through that barrier, because willpower can only really get you so far if there's still part of that connected to you deeply that you may not be aware of. I think that's a very deep thought.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think kind of in line with that is the idea of being against something.
Hmm.
And I remember hearing a quote recently that Mother Teresa was contacted to participate in a march against war. And she said, no, I really can't do that. But if you come to me about a march for something, I'll be there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes that's what we need, is that distinction
Right.
between working against something. The harder we work against something, the harder we fight something. It just gives it more energy, gives it more attention, and keeps it alive.
Yeah,
And-
that's true. You got to flip that script, right?
Exactly.
Just that simple twist of words or different positioning on how to approach a problem or a challenge could be half the battle. That's very
Sure.
interesting.
And
Sure.
like the story of the gentleman made me think about how you helped him find the driving seat again. It was
Mhm.
almost like he had lost the driving seat because of his deep-rooted belief about how he took medicine,
Hmm.
but actually you kind of gave him the keys and the steering wheel and the gear stick and the ability to almost drive again, and have some form of control over something that sat with him for so long.
Hmm. Uh, Again, I do want to stress that the individual really accomplishes that.
Mhm.
I appreciate it when somebody expresses how grateful they are to me, but I always make it very, you're the one that made the change. Maybe I had, or not maybe, but yes, I had some tools and some guidance that helped you get there. But I really want people to take ownership of the change. Um, and I don't wanna go off on another tangent, but using the word ownership makes me think of something else, that when somebody is dealing with an issue, whether it's, smoking or, whatever it might be, and often it can be a medical condition or, and all kinds of things, to not take ownership of it. The more you say, "I'm a smoker," well, you're gonna continue to be a smoker.
Mhm.
And that's another thing that I think is really important, is to certain things, to disassociate from them. Don't take ownership of them, because then it becomes a part of your identity. And if that's not what you want to be part of who you are, then you need to change those words.
Yeah.
And so often we fall into that trap of,
Yes.
you know,
I'm
this.
I'm I'm loving this conversation so much, because so much of what Claire and I talk about is about the self-talk, or about the inability to maybe achieve your goals, and just hearing you talk and reconfirm that our mind is so much more powerful than what we give it credit for. I think we sell ourselves short a lot there. And your storytelling, or you at least sharing the stories of some of your clients and patients, is really what brings your practice to life, right? So, um, is there or has there been an unexpected or surprising breakthrough that you've witnessed in your work that's been like, this was the most profound?
Yeah, actually, actually, there was one, and I this has probably happened a little bit more than maybe I should admit, that someone will really have a breakthrough or a tremendous change, and I'll find myself saying, "Oh my gosh, I wonder how that happened." Even though I was right there. But yeah, it's another story that I just, feel so good about. And this was a man who, was a retired physician in his 70s. And so he'd retired from, being a full-time doctor. He was an author. He wrote a lot of books about a lot of different things, but all he really wanted to do was increase his golf game. He had certain guys that he played golf with for years and years, every week. He said, "I just wanna be a better golfer. I'm not gonna be a pro at this point in my life, but I just want to improve my game." So to get started, I asked him if he had, like, a dream score, and he gave me a number, and then he started laughing. And I said, "Well, what are you laughing at?" He said, "I will never golf that score." He said, "That's just crazy." And I said, "Well, let's play around with that number anyway. Let's just kinda use it as a guidepost, so to speak." And he was somebody who just really got into what we were doing and very engaged, very involved. And so he took that number, and, he was also into AI, so he created this, graphic with that number in the middle, and, I said, "Make copies of that and put it every place. Put it on the dash of your car. When you open your laptop, it's the first thing you see. Put it on your bathroom mirror, inside, outside, and then don't think about it. Just see it. Just see it every place." Well, about 6 months later, we hadn't been working together for a while, but he was making changes in his golf, and a change in the swing, a change when he'd used a different club, and it just felt like he was making some really positive changes. But about 6 months later, I get a text from him, and he had just left the golf course, and he held up that, graphic that he had created with that number, and then in his other hand was his golf score, and he had golfed that score.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
He said that would never happen. It was
Wow.
impossible.
Yeah,
And yeah, and later he said, "I should have told you. I did it again the next day, so it wasn't a fluke."
that is so cool.
It
That
is so
is.
cool. But
Right.
there's an example of not using willpower. You know,
Right.
he didn't go out on the golf course every day and say, "Oh, I'm gonna golf better than I did last week," or whatever. But he just saw that number all over the place, and it went into his subconscious mind, and
Yeah.
his subconscious mind at some point said, "Oh, that's the score you wanna golf. Okay,
Right.
we can do that."
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That is incredidible.
It really was, and that was an example of what you proposed that, I thought, "Oh my god, that
Yeah,
that's really terrific."
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Karen, I'm just like, you see a lot of people, obviously, with various backgrounds coming to you for different things. Like, this is something you never expected him to come to you about. And it was, kind of off there. And you were like, wow. Um, when you think about your population there of people that do come to you, do you see common trends? Are there things that you see routinely folks coming to you for?
Yes, I have been working a lot with young athletes,
Mhm.
and, I suppose my sweet spot is high school, getting ready to go to college,
Mhm.
college, getting ready to graduate from college, and, typically, it's the parent that, thinks it would be a good idea for their son or daughter to work with me. And interestingly, it's been mostly young men. I don't know why,
Mhm.
but and I've been so impressed with their level of integrity, and uh, that's a whole nother subject. But I've really worked with some dynamic young people, and what I have found, though, they're very high achievers, both academically and in their sport. But when they make a mistake, if they lose a competition, if they feel like, if usually it's a team sport, like they did anything that kept their team from winning or whatever, that negative conscious voice starts in, and a word they almost all used is spiral. Once it
Mhm.
starts, I spiral down.
Mhm.
And so that would be a common theme that I find in that demographic of young people. And what we want to do is help them learn to recognize it immediately when it starts and shift it immediately. And so those are some of the tools that we work on. But that is a common theme among athletes, high performing athletes.
I wish that surprised me. I know that sounds awful, doesn't it? But I wish I was surprised by that. But I see how young people are under so much pressure.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know if it's changed, like I can only benchmark against my experience, right? When I was growing up. But it just feels like there's an immense pressure on these young people, like you say, academically,
Yeah.
with sports. And that spiral is such an interesting, when you think about it, it's like almost nowhere to go, right? You're just spiraling down.
Yes. And, I'm thinking of some of these parents who, thank God, the young person has this parent in their life because the parent sees the burden that their young person is carrying. And I remember this one dad saying, "This is his senior year in college. This should be one of the best times of his life."
Mhm.
Is so worried about being the best, both academically, and he was the team captain in his sport. And he said, "I just want him to get rid of some of that burden and enjoy his last year." And thankfully, we were able to help him do that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, hearing you talk about the example of the golf score with an athlete, although senior, still an athlete, and that visualization, right? To put this score everywhere, because you hear about a Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or, whoever sleeping with their basketball or, having a poster of some powerful words, at their locker. And so for people who are in a sport or even in a competitive place in their life, whether it's in their career or sports, I'm sure number one, that you've just taught us and we've heard through other examples in life, that power of visualization is so extremely important to, if you see it, you can believe it, right? So just doing those dream boards and seeing those impressions that we see in advertising all the time, where they say it takes 9 times to see something that you may not be aware of until you recognize that, oh, I have heard of that brand. I should try that. So,
yeah.
I mean, I guess that aspect of visualization plus finding those practices or reversing those habits or those mindset processes to get you over that hump, especially in kids where they have an extreme amount of pressure on their shoulders and they may not be prepared to handle it.
A couple of famous athletes that I think everybody will recognize the names. Michael Jordan, you mentioned, and Tiger Woods, they both credit hypnosis as being a big part of them reaching their levels of success.
Mhm.
So that says a lot, I think, for what we do.
Yeah.
So I suppose most of us aren't star athletes. I wish I was. Um, what is something that you think everyday people like myself can take from these conversations around hypnosis and from your experience, Karen, that we can apply daily just to kind of, I suppose, almost perform better in our own lives, be it something very small to something very big?
Well, I think it starts with awareness. What voices are you hearing? What is the message of your conscious mind? Does it remind you every day you're not good enough? You should have done this, you shouldn't have done that. Is that the voice you're hearing? So on one's own, that's probably the first step, is to just start listening to what are your thoughts? What is that conscious mind telling you each day? And then starting to come to a point of say, well, I don't believe that. That's not
Mhm.
true about me. And starting to see, this isn't hypnosis, obviously, but it's things that all of us can do in everyday life, which is what you're suggesting, and just to shift some of those thoughts. And I talked about taking ownership of certain things. If you are continuing to identify yourself as someone who has this problem or someone who is burdened with blah, 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 whatever it might be, just to start changing those words. And rather than saying, I have something, which takes ownership, you might just say, this has been mentioned, or there is this, or the, rather than my. That's one thing we can do is get away from taking claim to something that a way we really don't wanna be.
Mhm.
I think I think this whole conversation, Karen, has just been so insightful. Again, I think you mentioned, Jen, just of the power of the mind, just how powerful it is. And that actually we don't have to let it control us. We can take the reins as well. And
Right.
it might take some work. It's not going to happen overnight, but just taking those reins and just checking it.
Mhm.
And
And it doesn't I'm sorry.
no, no, go ahead, Karen.
Well, it just doesn't have to be hard either.
Mhm.
It takes awareness and then intention. And, once we become aware of identifying what do we want to be different, and then moving in that direction, and just um, that's where it is helpful to have someone help you do that, because if we've been listening to this particular message for years and years, it may not be that easy on our own to make that shift.
Yeah, and I think also, to really listen to your self-talk, even if you have to record yourself or find a friend or partner who calls you out on that self-talk.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times,
Perfect.
I think we say things and we don't even realize the words that are coming out of our mouth. And the words that come out of our mouth, especially for the core of our listeners who are, women in their, 40s and onward, where you would never say those things to somebody else, but
That's
you
true.
repeatedly say those things to yourself. So, in your experience, have there been reoccurring themes with women specifically that they come to you on to help them, correct or change?
Well, I think it's not as um, different from what we were talking about with the athletes, that
Mhm.
we tend to take on a belief that does not support us. Moms might say, "Oh, I wish I were a better mom. I'm not very good mom." And instead, look at all the things you do for your family
Right.
that make you a great mom, and turning that around right away,
Mhm.
catching it immediately. And what you just mentioned about calling your friend, or maybe you even recruit your kids. Maybe you discover that you say something that's kind of negative and you say it on a regular basis. Recruit your kids to remind you if they hear you do that, and maybe give them some kind of uh, impetus to,
Right.
and they will love being in a position where they can turn around and reprimand you.
I'm
Hey,
sure.
I feel like my teenagers just do that naturally.
Oh my,
Way.
Yeah. That's a really good
It
point
is.
though, is to help
absolutely.
find that power partner to help you self-correct because you don't know we say the mind is so powerful a lot of times and we say we can be in a trance of driving from point A to point B and not knowing how we got there. There's things that we tell ourselves every day that can
Absolutely.
cripple our inabilities to do the things that we want to do. So to have someone point those out could be, incredibly powerful. So that's a note well taken.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I don't know if do we have time? I have a little exercise I can walk people
That would be
through.
amazing.
Would be
Yes, we
amazing.
welcome that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it helps anybody who's questioning this idea of conscious mind, subconscious mind, whatever. But if whoever's listening, certainly if you're driving, don't do this. But if you can, just close your eyes and take a deep breath and just let your whole body relax. Just feel that sense of relaxation and let it kind of start at the top of your head and just work its way down all through your body and just relax. And once you get so relaxed that you just feel good, you feel very supported wherever you're sitting. And with your eyes closed, just imagine that you're standing at your kitchen counter. And on the counter is a cutting board, a very sharp knife, and off to the side is a bright yellow lemon. And you pick up that lemon in your non dominant hand and you just squeeze it a little bit and you find it has some give to it. Well, that tells you it's a really juicy lemon. You set it down on the cutting board and you pick up that sharp knife and just cut the lemon in half and just see the juice ooze out of each side, each half of that lemon, and just see the juice oozing out onto the cutting board. Pick up one half and just hold it up to your nose and take a whiff of it. And even if you don't particularly like the scent of lemon, just breathe it in. And my guess is that everyone out there is starting to feel saliva forming in the back of your mouth. And now you can just set the lemon back on the cutting board and put the knife down and just step back away from the kitchen counter. And if you haven't already, just swallow because now that you've had all of that saliva form in the back of your mouth, you definitely want to swallow. And I've never had anybody say no, they didn't have saliva form in the back of their mouth. And yet, there was no lemon, no cutting board, no knife. And look what your subconscious mind did. Look at how much power your subconscious mind had over your body, what you were seeing in your mind's eye, feeling in your mouth. So I just think that's a great example for people to really understand just how powerful your subconscious mind is, because that's what did that.
That was
That
really
was
cool.
that was
Yeah, I
that was
definitely
incredible.
was feeling that, and I felt like I could smell the lemon too.
Yeah.
Like, exactly what that is, and it just becomes so vivid,
It
every
does.
aspect. That was very
That was
powerful, that
great.
was very cool.
Good, good. I'm glad you liked it, and I hope that many of your listeners were in a position where they could do the same.
Or they can
Yes.
record and listen to this
There you
back
go.
when they can.
Right,
There you go. Yeah.
yeah.
So look, today we've had lots of conversation around stories that our subconscious writes. You just demonstrated very clearly the power of our subconscious, the beliefs we inherit, the habits we repeat. And we've also talked about hope, because those stories don't have to be permanent. Um, you know, I suppose what I'd love to leave with today, Karen, is a message that you wish everyone could take away when it comes to them using their own mind?
I would want everybody to know that they have the ability to change whatever they think will make their life better than what it already is. And if it's increasing one's performance in sports, uh, job, family, being a mom, whatever it is that they feel like they want to make a little bit better than what it is right now. They have the ability to do that, and they can do it with their acknowledgement and then use of the power of their subconscious mind. So I guess that's probably the most important thing, because once you understand that, then you're in a better position to take the next step, whatever it is. If it's to work with somebody like me, if it's to work with another coach or someone, or to recruit your kids to remind you to say things differently and make just little changes that move in that right direction. But just for people to understand how powerful they are.
Yeah. We'd like to say thank you, Karen. Today it's been so wonderful to connect and just talk about this part of our mind that I don't think many of us give thought to on a daily basis. And also just remind people out there that it's a powerful thing that we have there. Our mind is very powerful, and it can provide blessings and also curses, and
Sure.
there's support out there if people are looking for it. If there's things that people are grappling with and working through, there's lots of support available, and you're just one of those resources, Karen.
Thank you. And if I could just mention, I have a website. It's very simple, KarenRossNow.com. And if you want to just talk to me and find out if our working together might be a good thing for you, you can go to the website and schedule a call with me, or just email me, info@KarenRossNow.com. Happy to have, of course, a complimentary call and determine if this is the right avenue for you to travel.
Perfect. And we'll put all those links in the bio too, so they can find
Thank you.
them after the episode. Yes.
Well, and thank you both for inviting me. I know that the podcast is uh, relatively new, and you're just doing a fabulous job. And I want to thank you for having me as a guest. And I wish you both the best and successful moving on with this podcast. It's great, and you certainly
Yes.
have
Thank
a
you.
wonderful audience to reach.
Yes.
Yes, they
Thank
are
you.
a wonderful audience, that's for sure.
Good,
Yes.
good.
So, guests out there, Unravel and Uplift listeners, if today's conversation made you think differently about your own mind, or maybe some of the stories that you've been telling yourself have helped you understand that this episode could be for you or for someone who needs to hear it, please share it. We'd love to have you follow Unravel and Uplift and leave us a 5-star review. Help us, help you help yourself with people and coaches like Karen. And we'll continue to unravel, life's biggest questions and uplifting one another in future conversations. So hopefully we can all get a little stronger, a little wiser, and maybe a little more hopeful.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time where we unravel and uplift something new. Have a fabulous week.
Thank you.